I had just stepped into the Fairmont Grand's banquet hall in San Francisco when the first pair of eyes I met belonged to Aunt Loretta eyebrows, furrowed as if I'd shown up to the wedding in pajamas. The dress I'd chosen, a plum square neck design with delicate beading at the sleeves, once made me feel elegant in the fitting room. But now, against a backdrop of sparkling crystal chandeliers, ivory tablecloths, and the soft golden light of a luxury wedding ceremony, it felt like a misplaced bookmark among couples with fingers entwined, wineglasses raised, eyes brimming with bliss. I didn't spot a single familiar face right away, so I offered a polite smile and tucked myself into a corner near a vase of white tulips. But almost instantly, I heard a voice behind me. Did she really show up alone? I didn't need to turn around to know it was my sister, Miranda, 35, 2 kids, a successful husband, and the life our mother still referred to as stable. She was whispering to her husband, Max, but the volume was generous enough for me and probably the tulip vase to catch it all. I took a deep breath, lips still curved in a social smile. I was here to celebrate my cousin Mallory, not to absorb the family's collective pity parade. Mom appeared right on cue, Margaret Donovan, 62, in a navy lace dress and that familiar trail of Chanel No. 5. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe like she was auditing a failed project. Claire, you look fine, but I think something a bit brighter would have looked more cheerful. I'm attending a wedding, not a reality show, I said calmly. Sure, but that dark color, it doesn't exactly make you stand out, sweetheart. I'm 33, head of communications at a startup in Soma. I own my condo, pay my salary and my staff's, have no debt, owe no one. But to my mother, not having a husband meant I hadn't achieved anything. I had just turned toward the cocktail bar when a hand grabbed my elbow. Aunt Linda. Claire, still no one you're bringing home? I know a lawyer friend from college, twice divorced, but very respectable now. Thanks, but I'm not in need of legal representation, I replied, tight-lipped. Sweetheart, I just worry. 33, those eggs don't wait forever, you know? One more mental health comment and I was going to combust. Then a smiling waiter escorted me to table 19, tucked near a column, far from the stage, and, as I feared, an odd mix of a widow named Shirley, currently recounting her third hip fracture, a boy with headphones glued to his game, and Uncle Troy recently divorced for the second time and already smelling like he'd found the open bar. I smiled politely and sat just as Shirley leaned over. You, Margaret's daughter? I heard you're always so busy no one has time to love you. I swallowed a full sip of water, afraid a single word would send tears rolling down my cheeks. The ceremony hadn't even started, and I already felt like an item on display at a charity auction for unwanted things. Leaving crossed my mind, but I knew that would make me headline gossip in the family WhatsApp group. I reached for a tiny fruit tart, pretending it was the most important thing in my life. That's when Miranda returned, skipping all pretense of distance. You could wear that dress to a funeral. And you're wearing enough diamonds to distract from a crumbling marriage? The air froze. Max cleared his throat, pretending to get a text. Miranda paused, then chuckled dryly. Just kidding. You really need to lighten up, Claire. My grip tightened on the water glass. I wasn't here to be attacked by people who'd spent years deciding I was never enough. I came because I wanted to be kind because Mallory was kind. The string quartet began the first notes of Pachelbel's canon. Guests started moving to their seats. Mom leaned in again, whispering, You know, it's not your fault there's no one beside you. But you could try. Download one of those dating apps. Maybe let Miranda help. I said nothing. I rose and walked toward the white-carpeted aisle leading to the altar. I stood there, alone in a sea of people. The soft yellow lights made my plum dress stand out more than I wished. And then something unexpected happened. A large door at the back of the hall swung open with a dramatic creak loud enough that the band faltered for a beat. Every head turned, and I felt a chill at the back of my neck. Not from the AC. Something was about to shift. I didn't know in which direction. But it was undeniable this night. The one I came to alone might not end the same way. I remember clearly, When I was 8, Miranda was cast as the lead in Greenridge Elementary's winter musical. Mom cried watching her twirl in red sequins singing, "Let It Snow," while I stood backstage in an itchy snowman suit with a headpiece that squeezed my scalp. Back home, I waited for a single word of praise. Instead, Mom brushed past me like I was invisible, grasped Miranda's hands and beamed. "Do you know how brightly you shine tonight? Like a real star." And me? Still in my snowman costume, eating cold spaghetti at the kitchen table, fingers stained with set paint. From that day on, the roles were assigned. Miranda was the special one. I was steady. Every summer, she went to art camps, piano, ballet, horseback riding. I walked the dog, washed cars, filled out STEM camp scholarship forms. At 14, I won first place in the California State Math competition. Mom said, "Good. Keep it up. But don't get so buried in numbers that you forget how to be graceful, Claire." When Miranda was crowned homecoming queen, they threw a backyard party, invited half the neighborhood, even hired a guy to play Fleetwood Mac on acoustic guitar. My grandmother once pulled me aside in the kitchen, rested a hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to shine like your sister. You're enough, Claire." She passed away when I was 15. No one said I was enough after that. At UC Berkeley, I earned a full ride in digital communications. Miranda attended an expensive private design school in New York. Dad mortgaged a second house to cover it. After graduation, I worked my way from content assistant to campaign lead at an ad agency. I don't brag, but I know those performance stats were paid in blood, sweat, and endless nights. There was one and only one time Mom complimented me publicly. During an Easter gathering, I shared news about our company expanding overseas. She turned to Uncle David. "The girl's making an effort." My heart almost soared, until she added, "Though it's not the law career we'd hoped for." As for Miranda, she owns a boutique furniture store in Santa Barbara, vintage chairs, dried flowers, gilded mirrors. Most customers are friends of friends from the local elite. Anytime someone asks about her daughters, Mom pulls out showroom photos like she built the place herself. I don't envy Miranda's success. What I've always longed for is recognition. I used to believe that if I stayed strong, stayed quiet, worked hard enough, they'd finally see me. Turns out, they just looked right past. When my father was invited to speak at an investment seminar in Chicago, he brought Miranda along so she could connect with people who had a refined artistic sensibility. I found out through a Facebook photo, Miranda standing beside him, wine in hand, wearing a cream silk dress, captioned, "With the first man who taught me resilience." Resilience? I was the resilient one. I was the one who called the ambulance when Mom had chest pains on a freezing winter night. The one who renegotiated our insurance when Dad lost his job during the 2008 financial crisis. The one who sent money every month for 2 years to help cover Grandpa's medications. But no one posts photos of me. When my cousin Mallory sent out her wedding invitation, it read, "Claire Donovan +1. I left it blank. Not because I didn't have options. I did. A software engineer named Ben wanted to come. A coworker who'd shown interest, albeit a bit too much. I turned both down. I didn't want to bring someone just to make my family less uncomfortable with my life. They believed a man's presence would normalize my existence. But if I had to bring someone just to avoid judgment, then clearly I didn't need love, I needed space. The ceremony hadn't even started, and already I felt surrounded by the echo of childhood whispers, glances, quiet comparisons, and Miranda's warped laughter at the bar. Then, just as I was pretending to study the embossed menu, a rustle swept the room behind me. Something had happened, or someone. Light from the crystal chandelier reflected off the mirrored wall in the back of the hall. I turned, and for a moment, the air went completely silent. Someone was stepping through that door. I didn't know who he was yet, but his eyes locked onto mine as if I were the very thing he'd been looking for in a room full of strangers. My heart skipped a beat. Not from love. From instinct, something had just begun, and I wouldn't be invisible anymore. The man standing in the white doorway had a presence that cut through the pretension in the room. Charcoal gray suit, perfectly tailored, dark brown hair slicked back behind his ears. His gaze swept the wedding hall like he was evaluating risk in a multi-million-dollar deal. I don't know if anyone else noticed, but when his eyes landed on me still holding an untouched champagne flute, my heart stuttered. Before I could react, he walked straight toward me. "Sorry I'm late," he said, his voice low and raspy, like he'd just left a high-stakes meeting. Traffic on Nob Hill was a nightmare. A pause. The air stretched thin under suspicious stares. "Aren't you going to introduce your boyfriend, Claire?" Miranda interjected, lips curled. I turned toward him, swallowed the lump rising in my throat. Strangely, I wasn't afraid, just quiet until my voice found its place. "Everyone, this is James Whittaker. We're getting to know each other." He gently squeezed my hand while the entire table froze. No one said a word. Maybe they couldn't process it yet. Or maybe the shock was just enough to shut down their thirst for criticism. Monday morning, I sat in the 21st floor conference room, eyes on the KPI dashboard, ears half listening to the project manager's report, but my mind was lost in James and unanswered questions. Though we had never met before the wedding, every move he made had flowed like choreography. Part of me thought I should be concerned, but another part felt freed. Work was the only place no one asked, "When are you getting married?" At Vibion, the media tech company I joined 4 years ago, I wasn't Claire, Miranda's little sister, or Claire, still single, or Claire, maybe try a dating app. I was director of content strategy, the mind behind our viral Authentics campaign that hit 65 million global shares. I was a nominee for Woman in Martech West Coast by Fast Growth magazine. But even after I secured a 7-figure budget for a rebrand project in Berlin, my mom still asked, "When do you plan to settle down for real?" Each time I smiled quietly, she'd repeat, "Work is temporary, family is forever." I used to argue, explain, even get angry. But every debate ended the same way. I was the problem. After breaking up with Alex, I learned to be careful with trust. He was a real estate investor, smooth talker, thoughtful, well-versed in long-term plans. What I didn't see soon enough was how that polish masked a double life. He called me his stability base, while strategically networking with his assistant on business trips to Chicago. I found out everything through texts on his iPad while he slept off a gala hangover. The last message I read before walking out of his apartment was, "Don't worry, she suspects nothing." After that, I didn't date for 19 months. I dove into work. Not to forget him, but to ensure there was no room in my life for people like him again. During that stretch, I launched the Reclaim Her Voice campaign for a feminist beauty brand. No models, no filters, no scripts, just real stories. That campaign earned us a Creativity Award in Lisbon and an $18 million global deal. But at the office celebration, when I called to share the news with Mom, she simply said, "Congratulations. But Claire, don't you think you're working so hard because there's no one waiting at home?" I set the phone down without saying a word. That evening, I got a text from an unknown number. "Thanks for not kicking me out of the wedding hall right away. If you're up for coffee, I owe you an explanation. James." I sat on my sofa, city lights blinking outside my window, a glass of Merlot in hand. I didn't know why he had walked into my life just then. But something in his eyes, as he pretended to be someone familiar in a sea of strangers, made it impossible to shake the feeling that I had stumbled into something rare. Just like I never thought I'd meet someone who made me want to take out my earbuds and actually listen. I replied with just 3 words. "Tomorrow, 7 o'clock. Not because I believed, but because I wanted to know, could a stranger who appeared at my lowest moment be a turning point, or just another anchor? I set the phone down and turned into the kitchen, quietly boiling water for a mug of peppermint tea. The city was still awake. And me? Suddenly, I wasn't tired anymore. James. It didn't just walk into Mallory's wedding as if he belonged in the family. He brought with him a strange wave of changed attitudes from people who had looked down on me less than an hour ago. Still gently holding my hand, he tilted his head politely toward my mother like they'd met before. It's such a pleasure to meet you. Claire has told me so many wonderful things about her family. A simple line, but it didn't sound like the usual small talk. My mom, who rarely softened around anyone I've dated, suddenly blushed a little. Oh, really? She replied, her tone involuntarily gentler. And what field are you in? Tech, James answered, without elaborating. I just wrapped up a series of projects in Singapore, only made it today thanks to a stroke of luck. Max, Miranda's husband, approached, eyes scanning James, his polite tone stretched thin. What kind of tech exactly? He asked, casually weighing up potential competition. James gave a slight smile and plucked a wine glass from a nearby tray. Government-grade AI security systems, layered blockchain integration. A space no one really likes to talk about, if you catch my drift. Max was speechless. Miranda looked at me like she couldn't believe I'd attracted someone like him. Claire. She forced a smile. You really know how to keep secrets. You didn't ask. I shrugged, taking a small sip, not a hint of a tremble. We were escorted to a new table closer to the main stage, right next to the groom's family. Far removed from the corner I'd been assigned earlier, stuck between a widow and a kid with an iPad. James pulled out my chair before sitting down. It was a small gesture, but enough to cause a ripple of murmurs from a few of Mallory's younger cousins. Every move he made was poised but unforced, drawing attention without trying. When the waiter poured wine, James gestured toward me. Chill. I have the Pinot Noir from Napa Valley. The French dry reds don't suit her palate. I paused. You got that right, I said, eyeing him curiously. I didn't guess. He leaned in, voice low enough just for me. I noticed. Something tightened in my chest. Not from his words, but from how he said them. Without flattery, without pressure, like a fact that didn't need proving. My mom returned again, her face lit up with a rare kind of brightness. Claire, aren't you going to properly introduce me? James stood immediately. James Whitaker. It's an honor to meet Claire's mother. My mom smiled so widely it couldn't be hidden. She was such a stubborn girl growing up, and to think she could attract someone like you? I quietly clenched my napkin. She wasn't looking at me with disappointment or pity. In that moment, I didn't feel like the girl left out because she didn't have a boyfriend. I was the center of attention because of me, or at least because of the illusion James played so flawlessly. The dinner glowed under candlelight and soft classical music. James navigated conversations with ease, making each family member feel like they mattered while revealing almost nothing about himself. During a brief lull, I leaned over and asked, "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." James lifted his glass, eyes steady on mine. I know that look your sister gave you, that tone your mother used. I've seen people hurt others using the gentlest words. I don't like letting that happen when I can stop it. I felt exposed, not in a bad way, but like someone had finally read the things I never said out loud. Are you an actor? He laughed. I run a venture capital fund for medtech startups. But if my sister heard you ask that, she'd probably tell me to change careers. I rested my chin in my palm, lips curving. So, you're the well-timed hero? James shrugged. Just a passerby. But if someone's drowning in a crowd, they deserve to be pulled up, even if only for a few hours. I glanced around. My mother was telling Aunt Grace about a project I was working on, using words like breakthrough and brilliant. Miranda bit her lip, silent. And me? I smiled. Not because I was being recognized, but because I didn't have to fight for it anymore. That feeling, fleeting, delicate, was priceless. Even if it was an act, even if it only lasted for a few hours tonight, I had been seen differently, at least once. Enough to know I wasn't small. How this would end, I couldn't say. But one thing was certain. I would never walk into a crowd with my head down again. Someone had shown me, if only for a moment, that I deserved to be seen. James pulled my chair back in as he returned to the table. The candlelight cast shadows along his sharp jawline, and I had to look away to steady myself. What do you do? He asked, once seated again, his voice cutting gently through the violin music. Strategic marketing, I replied, fingers tracing the rim of my glass. I specialize in brand repositioning and integrated campaigns. Currently director of content at Vibion's San Francisco branch. He nodded slightly, eyes connecting invisible dots. So you're the one behind the Reclaim Her Voice campaign? I froze. How do you know that? Last October, you spoke at the Next Gen Storytelling Tech Conference in Seattle. You wore an olive green blazer, hair half up, and ended your talk with the line, "Linguistic freedom begins with internal self-respect." I set my glass down, heartbeat faltering. You were there? James smiled. I spoke during the afternoon sessions. AI in emotional response systems. You didn't stay for that part. I remembered. The talk ran long, and I had to rush to the airport. But I couldn't believe he remembered so many details. I'd thought I was just another forgettable voice among dozens of presentations. You notice a lot, I said softly, eyes on the wine but attention fixed on the space between us. Not with everyone, he said, so sincerely I didn't want to question it. All evening, we talked like the noisy banquet didn't exist, like the music, flowers, and polite toasts were just background noise. He told me about growing up in Portland, the middle child of 3 brothers, and a mother who taught linguistics but still doubted his decision to skip grad school and start a company. I told him about the pressure of being a daughter in a family where achievement was never enough, about how I was judged by my relationship status instead of my competence, about the quiet ache of constantly having to prove I belonged in my own home. As the stage lights shifted to a soft blue for the groom's speech, James leaned toward me. My family used to think I was just a guy dodging responsibility with pipe dreams. Then my venture fund ended up backing the hospital where my dad was being treated. That was the first time he actually looked at me. So it's not just me living in that gray area between expectations and reality. He held my gaze longer than necessary for a simple nod. We were all taught that we had to become perfect to be loved, when really, all we ever needed was someone who accepted our most honest selves. Confetti burst from the head table signaled the cake cutting. But in my mind, one question echoed. Was he speaking to me or about me? On the dance floor, the bride and groom turned gently to the music, their eyes reflecting pure trust. I watched without envy, only the strange sense that I was standing outside a world that never felt like mine. James extended his hand. Shall we play our parts too? I placed my hand in his cool against my palm. We stepped into the crowd, swaying slowly, to an 80s ballad. He didn't move like someone trained, but like someone guiding a lost traveler back home. Through the whole song, I didn't have to smile to please anyone. Didn't have to brace myself to prove anything. The silence between beats somehow let James read things I'd never dared say. As the song ended, his hand still held mine. Only when my mom appeared, her face unusually bright, did he gently step back. Claire, I have to say, she began, voice wavering between sentiment and strategy. You look happier than ever. I didn't respond. James took a glass of water from a server and placed it into my hand. Maybe she just needed someone who could see what she never dared believe about herself, he said in my place, still looking at me. That night, as the glittering ballroom lights faded, I stepped out onto the hotel balcony with James. The air was crisp, but my hands didn't shake. He leaned against the railing, eyes fixed on the Golden Gate Bridge in the distance. Where do you think this is going? I asked, not trying to hide how scared I was to hope. James didn't look at me as he replied. I don't know, but if I had the choice, I'd want to watch the whole next chapter without walking out halfway like I did at last year's conference. I laughed, not out of sarcasm, but because I felt something shifting inside me, gently, in that quiet space between 2 strangers. The confetti hadn't even settled when Miranda appeared, heels clicking hard against the marble floor, her eyes sharp as a freshly honed fruit knife. Well, Claire, she said sweetly, pouring sugar into cold tea. You really are good at keeping secrets. James instinctively shifted, stepping between us. I don't believe we've met, he said, every syllable perfectly polite. Miranda didn't back off. She twirled her cocktail glass, the stones on her bracelet sparkling beneath the wall sconce. You don't have to know me for me to smell an act. I spoke to hotel management. A man like you wouldn't be a longtime boyfriend if you only asked about this ballroom 2 hours ago. The tension stretched tight as a bowstring. I could hear my heartbeat breaking rhythm with the music. Miranda, I said, keeping my voice even. This isn't the time. Not the time? Or are you just afraid of the truth coming out? She cut me off, eyes locked on mine. Everyone's been talking, Claire. You show up with a magazine-perfect man, pretend he's your old flame? How long did you think you could keep that up? I turned to James. His eyes were calm. No denial. No retreat. My legs felt frozen. My lips dry. A coldness spread from my chest like an invisible hand tightening around my throat. What do you want, Miranda? I asked, voice low. Nothing, she shrugged. Just a reminder that creating a lie to escape shame still makes you the same pathetic girl. I stepped back like I'd stepped on glass. James finally spoke. She didn't ask me to do this, I offered. Miranda raised an eyebrow. How noble. Good for her, bad for your reputation. I cut in, no longer worried about appearances. Enough. If you were really happy with your life, why are you spending your time tearing someone else down at Mallory's wedding? Miranda stared at me, silent. I turned to James, something blurred and bitter rising in my chest. You don't have to do this anymore, I said, voice low and tired. The act is over. He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. Thank you for pulling me out of the muck, even just for a few hours. But I don't want to feel like I was so pitiful I had to hire someone to play pretend. Claire, you don't— He stepped forward, but I stepped back. We don't know each other. We never actually started anything. And what happened tonight should stay right here. He didn't argue, didn't try to hold me back, just looked at me like he'd just lost something he never even got to have. I turned away, walking out of the ballroom like someone escaping a fire. Inside the women's restroom, I stared at myself in the mirror, cheeks flushed, makeup fading after hours of holding back tears that never quite fell. I took off my earrings one by one. The sound of metal hitting the sink was faint, but in my ears, it rang sharp just like Miranda's voice had echoed for over 20 years. You've always been the one trying to copy. Out on the back terrace, the night air had cooled. I stood by the railing, watching the harbor lights flicker on the dark water. Footsteps behind me made me turn. James. I couldn't let you walk away without explaining, he said, voice low and strained. I said nothing. You think I did this out of pity? That's not true. I recognized you in the hotel lobby. Remembered the Seattle conference. And when I saw your eyes surrounded by people just waiting to crush your pride, I couldn't stay silent. You don't know anything about me, I said. Wrong. I know you held your ground without anyone's approval. I saw you lead a global campaign without ever raising your voice. You never pretended to be someone else just to please them. You think that makes you vulnerable. But that's exactly what sets you apart. I gripped the cold railing tighter. Those are awfully nice words for a random encounter. Because I don't believe in random. I turned, locking eyes with him again. In those silver gray eyes, there was no performance, no mask. Claire, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know, what I felt for you tonight was real. Even if it's only just begun. I didn't answer. I wasn't sure if I was touched or spinning, no longer able to tell what was genuine after Alex. I've seen what it looks like when a woman gets betrayed by someone she loved. I don't want to be the next name on that list. I lowered my head. Don't turn me into another lesson, James. I don't need someone else teaching me how to trust. He nodded slowly. Then let me be the one who waits for you to come back when you're ready. And then he turned and walked away. No more words, no backward glance. I stood there in the dark, the music fading behind me, trying to figure out whether the lump in my chest was regret or defense. Maybe both. I didn't sleep that night. After leaving the hotel, I took a cab back to my apartment in Pacific Heights. I unlocked the door, kicked off my shoes, and sat motionless on the couch beneath the dim kitchen lights. The night wasn't quiet, it slammed into me like crashing waves. Miranda's words in front of everyone. My mother's silence when everything fell apart. And the way James walked off, not pleading, not explaining, just leaving an empty space behind. The next morning, I went to the bakery near my place where Olivia and I often met on weekends. She was sitting by the window, latte in front of her, laptop open but eyes glued to her phone. "I figured you'd disappear for a few days after that party," Olivia said, not even looking up. I pulled out a chair, silent for a moment before speaking. Miranda exposed me in the middle of the reception. My mom gave me that look, the quiet disappointment, and the only man who ever made me feel like I was worth something walked away. Olivia set her phone down. "Exposed? Maybe. But ditched? No. You weren't there, Olivia. You didn't see the way everyone looked at me. I don't need to see it to know what it feels like to be laid bare," she said, steady eyes on me. "But I saw the way James looked at you while you were hurting. That wasn't a guy putting on an act." I bowed my head, fingers wrapped around the coffee cup. "I'm scared it's real. And if it is, then I don't know what to do with it." Olivia tilted her head slightly. "You're punishing James for what Alex did. Totally different people, Claire. One cheated in the dark. The other stepped into the light to protect you, before you even asked for help." I let out a long breath. "I don't know where to start. Try starting with yourself. Then Miranda. Face it. You're not 18 anymore, you don't get to run." That afternoon, I texted Miranda a simple message. "Want to meet? My treat. Usual place." Not even 10 minutes later, she replied, 6 o'clock. "Don't be late." We met at Urban Grind, a familiar cafe on Fillmore Street, the place we used to escape to after college arguments with our mom. Miranda arrived early, as always. Gray cashmere sweater, tired eyes under flawless makeup. I didn't dive into it. I just asked, "Where's Bradley?" She froze for a second. "We're trying a separation. Counselor's idea." I nodded. For the first time in years, my sister looked worn down. "Why did you do it, Miranda? That night?" She didn't answer right away. She stirred her tea, staring into it like it held some explanation. "Because you walked in with someone like James, and I was standing next to a husband who doesn't want to come home anymore." Silence stretched between us. "I was jealous of you, Claire." The confession landed like a drop of cold water. "You have a career, strength. You do things I never dared to. I'm still living in the blueprint they laid out for us." "But you were the one they loved," I said, unable to hide the bitterness. Miranda looked at me, slowly. "I was spoiled, Claire. Not loved. You may not have had their applause, but you were never controlled." We sat there a long time. No arguing, no posturing. Just two women finally admitting that maybe we'd both been victims of expectations we never chose. Before I stood up, I said, "Whether you ruined things with James or not, I still have to face the family." Miranda met my eyes. "And you'll be fine, because you've never lived to please them." On Sunday morning, I drove to my parents' home in Marin County. The white wooden house with its dark green roof looked just as it did when I was in high school, but today, it felt like a former battlefield. Dad opened the door. Mom stood behind him, still holding a travel magazine, as if waiting for a good enough reason to slam the door shut. I stepped inside. "We need to talk, all three of us." No one spoke for the first few seconds. Then my mother nodded and stepped aside. We sat in the living room. I didn't beat around the bush. "Mom, Dad, what happened at Mallory's wedding wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. It was the result of years of being dismissed, compared, forced to live in the shadow of some daughter version you created that was never really me." My mother sighed. "You have a career. You have talent. I've never denied that." "You never denied it, but you never acknowledged it either." I turned to Dad. "You've never once asked me if I'm happy, only if I've met someone yet." He sat quietly, fingers laced together. "I don't need a man to be complete. But I do need my parents to see that I am enough. Not when I get married, not when I have kids, right now." The room grew heavy, like the air before a storm. Finally, Dad spoke, voice hoarse. "I was wrong to think stability meant having someone beside you. Maybe I pushed that onto you because I was afraid you'd be alone." I stood up. "I might be alone, but I won't keep letting my own family abandon me." Then I walked out. I didn't cry. I didn't yell, but something inside me softened like the surface of water after a perfectly timed rain. I left that house not with a weight on my chest, but with a decision. If I ever move forward with someone, it has to be someone who truly sees me whole and without conditions. 3 days after that conversation with my parents, I was standing in line at a bookstore in the Mission District when my phone buzzed. A strange number lit up the screen, but not the kind that made me hesitate. A deep male voice came on after a drawn-out hello, like he'd been waiting. I'm across the street from Valencia. Not here to pressure you, just hoping you'll hear me out this time, without anyone else's eyes in the way. I looked out the window. Under the shade of the street trees, James stood by a small cafe. No suit, no flash, just a plain rolled-up shirt and a simple silver watch on his left wrist. I crossed the street without overthinking it. Without saying a word, he pulled an old, tri-folded movie ticket from his shirt pocket. The Seattle presentation. I've kept it all this time. I know it sounds weird, but when I saw you that day, I thought she might change the way a company sees its customers as real people. Not everyone can do that. I took the ticket from his hand, his fingers brushing lightly against mine. No scripted apology, no drawn-out excuses. Just a man in front of me, no performance. Claire, I don't regret pretending to be your boyfriend that night, but I want to know you without pretending anything. If you're willing, just once a date with no stage, no assumptions, no act. I nodded without words. Our first real date happened at a ramen place in Japantown. We didn't talk about the past or rehash our mistakes. We swapped odd obsessions. I'm addicted to true crime podcasts. He's into cactus gardening. We debated Nolan films and whether white chocolate really counts as chocolate. No scripts, no gaps. He didn't ask why I once walked away in silence. I didn't ask who made him that way. We chose to start in the middle, where neither of us had to save the other. 6 months passed. Fall slipped through San Francisco with salty winds and the scent of wildflowers. I moved into a 6th-floor apartment near Lafayette Park not because someone wanted me to, but because I liked how the light hit my desk in the late afternoons. James never interfered with my work. But he asked the right questions about the ideas for my new campaign, the inspiration I was chasing, and the fear of falling into old patterns. When I got invited to speak at a global conference in Zurich, he didn't bring flowers to the airport. He sent me a blank notebook with one note. Write down what makes you shine, not what pleases others. Miranda changed too. She enrolled in a tiny space design class at the California Institute of the Arts. Sometimes she'd send me sketches with a note, not as cute as your stuff, but hey, at least I'm drawing my own now, not copying Pinterest. Dinner at our parents' house no longer included quiet questions about marriage. Instead, Mom carefully asked about my recent industry article, and Dad wanted James to explain how AI detects fraud in insurance claims. When everyone sang happy birthday over a chocolate mousse cake Miranda had ordered herself, I didn't feel like a flaw to be covered up. I was part of that table, not the shadow on the side. On Thanksgiving night, as we left my parents' house, James held my hand in the empty driveway. I didn't think a family dinner could ever feel peaceful. I leaned on his shoulder. Because you didn't show up to change anyone. You just showed up when I needed to feel seen. He smiled softly and whispered, "Funny, isn't it? A silly little prank turned into the most serious thing in my life." I didn't reply, just held his hand tighter as the wind turned cold. There was no fairy tale ending, no engagement on a seaside balcony, just two ordinary people choosing to face pain with kindness, choosing to listen instead of trying to fix each other. Claire's story proves that sometimes, the most painful and humbling moments open the door to real growth. From someone always trapped under comparison and expectations, she learned how to set boundaries, speak her truth, and welcome love without masks. Claire didn't need anyone to complete her. She saved herself by choosing honesty, self-worth, and a life no longer tied to others' approval. What do you think about Claire's journey? Have you ever felt judged for not living up to your family's expectations? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt and powerful stories about life and family.